Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. Thanks for joining us. See a lot of people trickling in. I'll give this, 45 seconds till we give everybody a chance to join. But thank you, everyone, for making the time today. We're gonna have some fun today. We have a really fun topic that should be relevant for every single person who's touched a golf club. And I'm personally really excited to learn. So yeah, thank you all for joining. All right, I'm gonna get started. We're gonna have about a 5-minute intro opener section before we get to the meat of the presentation. So that'll give others a chance to join. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Ji-Hye Lee, CEO of Sportsbox. I'm joined by other panelists on this webinar, members of our team, and our guest, Dr. Jeff Broker. Start with Phil, Dr. Phil Cheetham. He's our Chief Science Officer. We also have Chris Ray, our VP of Sales and Business Development, Paul Park, our VP of Business Operations, and Edwin Fu, who is our Director of Sales and our guru in using Sportsbox. So that's the team that you see here. We love seeing all of you guys on this webinar. We love the enthusiasm for learning. We're all a bunch of nerds here, so we love when we meet other fellow nerds who love learning new information, just trying to gain a little bit more on how to play this game better. So I'll start with a brief intro on Sportsbox, just in case some of you may not have used it or know it super in depth. And of course, I'll go through this quickly because I know you guys are here for the presentation itself. First, I'll start with this statement that we wholeheartedly believe in on this team. You can't improve something you don't measure. We really, truly believe that the first step to improving is to assess accurately, and to assess accurately, you need to measure, and that goes for the ball flight, that goes for the golf swing. So we have created a tool and a technology to measure the motion and the swing accurately, for everybody to be able to access through a mobile phone. And we wanted to democratize this technology. So hopefully all of you guys are taking advantage of that, and for yourselves and for your students to improve faster. The first part of what we offer is that you can point and shoot for a video that turns into 3D. First part of the 3D is the avatar that allows you to see the motion from multiple angles, including face on, down the line, behind, so on and so forth. You can take the video from face on and get a down the line video, a down the line avatar. You can take the video from down the line and see it from face on as well. So it's an incredibly cool technology. You can also measure the motion. As you'll see further on in our presentation, there are dozens and dozens of different motion data you can use to analyze what the different segments of the body are doing, how fast they're moving, rotating, linearly translating. So we're really excited about this and all the improvements that we have made and will continue to make your lives easier. And of course, we have a lot of features for coaching and for your students to use in their practices. I won't go into too much depth here, but if you schedule a demo with Edwin here, he'll be able to share more on all the great tools that we have built for you. In case you have missed it, we have some app updates that I wanted to talk about. And then for the month of September, we have a special price for coach plans. So for anybody who does any kind of coaching and are interested in using Sportsbox, good news, the Sportsbox premium plan, the coach plan, is now $720 for the year if you sign up in September. So do book a demo with Edwin. His email is at the bottom of the slide to take advantage of this. The app update that we made, the big update that we've made in the last month or so, is the down the line capture. So 3D from down the line, and special trackers and indicators that are not available from a face-on capture. So those include down the line shaft angle information. So measuring the shaft, steepness or shallowness at specific positions in the golf swing, namely where the shaft is at a vertical angle. We also have thrust numbers for the head, pelvis, chest, hands, as well as the club head, which are all really, really, really interesting numbers to study. I look at all of these for myself all the time, and finding out really neat things about what I'm doing with my swing. But yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys as you guys explore these new numbers. We're still learning a lot about different patterns. So please, ping us if you find something interesting along the way. Finally, I'm happy to introduce the speakers for today. Of course, Dr. Phil Cheetham doesn't really need an introduction, but he's our Chief Science Officer. He's a former Director of Sports Science and Technology for the USOPC, founder of AMM, co-developer of TPI 3D, and so on and so forth. Dr. Jeff Broker, he's a PhD in biomechanics, associate professor in biomechanics for University of Colorado Springs, where he teaches biomechanics and exercise science, as well as in the PGA management program at UCCS. And he was also with the USOPC as a biomechanist. So I will turn things over to these two gentlemen. We are, as I mentioned earlier, this is a topic that should be relevant for everyone. Dr. Broker did some very interesting studies using Sportsbox, measuring swings when golfers are not under pressure on the range versus where they are in different scenarios. So I'm very, very excited to learn more about the findings. All right, so Phil, do you want to start?
Yep, I'll start. All right, you see my screen? Can you hear me? Yeah, am I still on mute? Hang on. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up? Okay, good. Well, the title is Motion Capture and Analysis of Amateur Golfers in Playing Conditions and Opportunities with the Sportsbox Platform, which is the research that Jeff, Dr. Broker, has done very recently and is very excited to talk to you about. I'm not going to take much of your time because I want to give him as much time as I can. But I do want to give you some relevant definitions, because he will be talking about a lot of parameters that he's measured, and I want to make sure that you understand them. One of the key things that he'll talk about, though, is how easy it was to set up a single iPhone and do this on the driving range and in the game during a tournament without disrupting the tournament. So without further ado, I will talk about a couple of definitions and then quickly hand it over to Jeff. All right, one of the things I always like to talk about is these two terms that we've kind of invented ourselves or acquired ourselves: trackers and indicators. A tracker is a kinematic parameter that has a time value or a value every frame in the swing. So you can think of a tracker as a curve, a time series curve. Here's an example of pelvis turn. And so we could click on any point in that and find out the value. Now, an indicator is a value at a specific point, like what is pelvis turn at address, what is pelvis turn at top or impact, or even what is pelvis turn at its maximum, which may not be at top. It may be just in somewhere in the backswing. So you can see that in the app, you can actually choose between whether you want to see trackers or indicators. Trackers will change as you step through the swing, whereas the indicator will have one single value that doesn't change because it's giving you an indication of something that happened in the swing at a specific instance. Now, indicators can also be calculated from other indicators. We call those compound indicators. like wrist gain factor, how much speed you gain across the wrist, is shaft swing speed maximum divided by arm swing speed maximum. So we can do all kinds of calculations to come up with new factors and different values. Okay, a couple of definitions of parameters that Jeff is going to talk about. The first one is shaft face-on angle at arm parallel. We can measure the swing at different key positions, as I mentioned, address, top, impact, and finish. But we can also do others like club parallel, lead arm parallel. So this particular one, lead arm parallel, was in the Morad system would be called P5. It's the angle of the shaft from a face-on view with respect to the vertical. Now, currently we're measuring it with respect to the bottom vertical, but I think in the future we may change measuring it with respect to the top vertical, because that's a little bit more intuitive for golfers, because you can basically think that if it's before vertical, you're looking at a downswing loader and not a caster. If it's after vertical, it's more likely to be an early release or a cast. So that's what we're looking at with shaft face-on angle. And also, one of the things I like to mention is that I like to think of lead arm parallel as a power position. And the reason I think about that is because it's telling you about what's going to happen in the downswing. And there are several key indicators that you can look at, not just the face-on shaft angle, but also wrist angle should be less than 90. Release has not occurred yet. X factor is still very large. Pelvis is near square. The pelvis turning speed in the kinematic sequence is slightly before max or right at max. And the pelvis has dropped to the bottom that it's going to drop to before it starts lifting again. And the pelvis and chest are still centering. So you can kind of go through this checkpoint list at lead arm parallel, and you'll immediately know whether we're going to have a good downswing and a powerful downswing. So Jeff will talk a little bit more about that parameter. Another one I want to talk about is pelvis lift, but I want to focus mainly on this indicator here, which is pelvis lift into impact. So I mentioned that the pelvis drops, and that drop point is about arm parallel. So we measure that drop point, how low it is compared to where you were at address, and then how much above the address position you go to at impact. And that differential measured in inches is actually correlated to club head speed, and it's also an indicator of forces that you're pushing, vertical forces that you're pushing into the ground. So it's a very, very good indicator to look at. I think Jihei was working on that one, and she saw that as she had a better lift into impact, she ended up gaining some club head speed. So these are very cool and very impactful and useful indicators. Okay, the next and final one that I want to look at is sway gap. We've got a lot more research to do on this yet, but I'll give you a definition in the meantime. Sway gap is the horizontal distance between the chest and the pelvis from a front-on view. So it's measured at a point mid-hips and a point mid-shoulders. So you can see here that it's this distance, and that changes throughout the swing. So this sway gap is in fact a tracker, but we do pull off specific indicators during the swing, like what is its value at impact, what is its value at part the way down in the downswing, and in fact it maxes out after impact. So there's a couple of common things that we found with tour pros. They all have a negative sway gap at impact. And that means that the chest is horizontally more away from the target than the pelvis. A max negative, I mentioned that already, max negative sway gap occurs after impact. And the amount of sway gap actually can influence the swing direction. So I know people like Terry Rolls and a lot of other top instructors are using sway gap. I think it's one of Ryan's favorite ones as well. It's similar to spine tilt. You can think of spine tilt as a line from mid-pelvis to mid-chest. It's very, very similar to that. It's another way of looking at it. And we're definitely going to be doing some more research and looking at the profiles of the tour pros. Anyway, that's it for me. I want to hand it over to Dr. Jeff Broker and let him talk about analyzing golfers in playing conditions.
All
So
right.
unshare my screen. Hang on a sec. And I'll give it over to you, Jeff. There you go.
Great. Thank you, Phil. I'll share my screen here. How are we doing? Is it up? It is. Thumbs up. Okay. All right. Boy, thanks for the opportunity to go through this. I'm having so much fun doing research with this platform. As I go through this, just housekeeping here, Jihei and Phil, Dr. Phil, they're going to be watching for any hands that raise. If there's a question that seems to be best answered at that moment, they'll pipe in and let me know if there's a question. Otherwise, we'll wait till the end and get into that. You see the title there. Phil gave you the title earlier, Motion Capture Analysis of Amateur Golfers in Playing Conditions, Opportunities with Sportsbox. My collaborators here, Dr. Alex Moorhead, worked out there on the course with me, and he was up by the holes mapping locations of shots. Nate with Sportsbox and Phil have been tremendously helpful in helping me work through the data and troubleshoot. So anyway, thanks to those individuals. So I've got three objectives here. One is I've been in this business for a long time. Phil and I, way back to the Olympic Committee, we're so excited to be able to have a platform that can do this type of analysis and do it with golf, obviously. So I want to talk really quickly about some unique opportunities that this platform gives us. I'm then going to give you an example of this recent research we did. We call it the 2023 Par 3 study. Where I actually used this Sportsbox platform to measure golfers again while they played, and that's going to be the sort of focus. And then I'm going to finish up with showing you that there's so many questions that now can be asked and managed or addressed that we couldn't do just a couple of years ago, and we've wanted to be able to do these things. So I'll step through that. All right. So first of all, what's so important to me as a researcher and someone interested in golf performance is that Sportsbox is passive or unobtrusive. There's no wires. It's portable. As you know, single smartphone, phone capture. It's in the moment. It's on the tee box. It's on the range. That's the calibration feature. You can do it on the course, in the course of play. And I say we're leaving the laboratory setting, finally leaving the laboratory setting. And why is that important? Here are some complications. Just if you think about what it's like to collect data in the laboratory, whether it's a running mechanics or cycling or golf or tennis, if it's in the laboratory, it carries these issues. It's got a protocol that has to be decided upon that may influence the performance. Is there a warm-up? Right? If there are sensors, where are they placed and how long do they take to place them? Range of motion checks. You get someone all wired up and with their markers, and you have to test to see if they can move freely. Then you have to ask yourself, what are we going to study? What are we going to do? What swings are we going to look at? How many do we need to look at? Do we ask them to target, or am I looking for just hitting it into a net? Right? What is the targeting information? What are the intentions? Are they shot shaping? Is the intention club head speed? Is it control of distance? If you don't think of these things, you can have this noise in the data. Club changes, systems that have sensors, you have to change the sensors out, and your subjects standing there waiting for you to do that. Then you have to pick which trials to analyze. It's very, very convenient and very attractive to say, oh, that's the best swing. Let's analyze that. That might not be the most informative, right, for the performer. You might want to know, what did you do wrong on that swing, right? Or maybe compare good and bad. And fundamentally, it's this issue here is that when you're in a laboratory setting, you've put the golfer into a performer role. There's anxiety, there's waiting time, there's the sense of being measured and monitored and videotaped, and that's not, nobody plays like that, or at least few people play like that, right? They're not a player, they're a performer, and therefore sometimes we can't expect what they do in a laboratory to be exactly what they do on the course. All right, so this is where we get to being course ready. We have now a platform that we can join the playing field and actually measure data there. We don't have to worry about pre-shot routines. Targeting instructions, we don't need to give them any instructions. They're playing golf. They're hitting shots at flag sticks. If they're doing practice swings and waggles, they get to do what they normally do. Club selection isn't a problem. We simply, in the Sportsbox app, go in and indicate which club they've selected. And what I'm going to get into at the end of this talk, kind of some icing on the cake, is we can actually go back and forth between the range and the course and ask, are there differences there? Playing conditions or wide open. All right, so that gets me to the 2023 par 3 study. First, I'm going to give you just a real brief overview of what we did. This is the research question. Oops, again. Research question: does hole shot difficulty influence golf swing kinematics in playing situations? Where did this come from? I'm a golfer, an avid golfer. I belong to a club. Our club has an easy par 3, a moderately hard, and a very difficult par 3. And I've been playing them for 20 years, and I've seen hundreds and hundreds of shots. And I know that people don't play the same, don't seem to perform as well. They clearly have an interaction with the anxiety and the difficulty of the hole. I thought, boy, for the first time, I can set myself up on tee boxes. I maybe measure this and pick it up with Sportsbox. All right, so here's how I would wrap it all up. In particular, given a common shot distance, this is what I strategically used on our course, 3 par 3s, all the same distance. Do golfers in real playing conditions modify their mechanics intentionally, right? Maybe strategically or unintentionally due to nerves and tension in response to shot difficulty. Here's the design. We had 39 male golfers. I tested them across 2 different days. This is at the Country Club of Colorado. I should put an asterisk in here. When you see the data and you see some of the distances or the club head speeds and so forth, we're at 6,200 feet. So the ball goes a little bit further. A lot of 9 irons and 8 irons were could be used for a 170-yard shot. Pretty wide range of subjects here, or ages, because they were competing in Saturday morning tournaments. Indexes pretty wide, plus 3.2 to 27. I had control of the distances on these 3 par 3s. So the superintendent set them up. It's holes 6, 11, and 17. Set them up at exactly 170 yards using middle pin placements. So there was nothing tricky. They weren't hidden pins or tucked pins. They were right in the middle at 170 yards. The idea was ideally everybody would use the same club across all 3 holes. That was probably true for 90% of the golfers. A few of them went to a longer club during later in the round at the last one, but for the most part, we had similar clubs. Before the round, I met them on the first tee. I know probably 80% of these golfers, gave them some informed consent. They signed up. I got them excited about what they're going to see on the end of the whole project. They're going to see their data in Sportsbox, and they got excited about that. We took their height, recorded their USGA index, got their email for communication. And then critically, this is how we have to work in research. We have to be careful not to influence performers or the performance by what we say. I told them, we're collecting data, and rather than go up on the range and collect a whole bunch of swings and average those where things you're changing and you're modifying, I want to get you in real playing conditions. So I'm gonna get 3 of your swings out there in the course on the par 3s. I'll average them together and I'll give you the data. And they thought that was great. What I did not tell them was that I'm actually interested in if there's differences across those holes. If I had told them, I want to see how differently you play on 17 versus hole 6, they're going to think, oh, yeah, I need to think about, I need to swing the same, don't I? I don't want that. I wanted them playing the way they normally play. So a little bit of look at the 3 holes. Hole 6, the first one, 170 yards, huge green, almost 8,000 square feet. You can see there the tee boxes on the right in that Google Earth image, and protected right and left by some bunkers. It's the number 15 hole in the course, handicap hole, comes up first. On the right, you can see the look from the tee box. Hole 11, 170 yards over water, moderate size green, so a little over 5,000 square feet. And the carryover water is not that long, 130 yards. So a shot hit a little heavy, may still make it. There's a kind of a bailout area to the left of the bunker that you see there. It's the number 14 handicap hole in the course. And then finally, this is the signature hole, 170 yards, very narrow green, 3,500 almost square feet. 150 yards of the 170 is over water, and anything blocked right is in the water. Both the left and right sides are protected by bunkers. Again, I've been playing this course for over 20 years, and the number of 5 to 12 handicap golfers that'll pull this shot 30 yards left is astounding. And so that's the idea. It's, boy, we got 3 different holes that they play, and I can set them up the same. And do they use different techniques? So that's the 3 par 3s. What variables did we look at? As Jihei said, there's dozens and dozens. I'm going to add and dozens and dozens and dozens of variables that you can pull out of this platform. I selected those that we thought would be perhaps most sensitive to the difficulty of the hole. Some of those we looked at timing, the backswing versus downswing tempo, peak hand speed before impact, how many milliseconds before impact did that peak hand speed occur, club head speed, pelvis, chest, and lead arm rotational velocities, where that club head speed's really coming from and how it's built. Rotations, including max pelvis and chest rotations at the transition, and what those 2 rotations were at impact. What else? We looked at shaft angle at lead arm parallel. Phil just gave a great example of that. Max pelvic sway and sway gap. He also described those. Pelvic drop max and downswing and pelvic lift. So he was helping us with those as well. And as I mentioned earlier, we also did record the shot outcome, both estimated distance to the hole and shot quality based on sort of a golfer's impression of, was it just off the green? Was it close to the pin? Was it in a greenside bunker? Was it shanked or in the water? There was a metric that we developed, and we're still analyzing that data. Today, I'm not going to focus on that, but we do have data that represents shot outcome. All right. So results. Let's look at these. So of the 39 golfers, we had 32 of them played all 3 holes. We had some lightning at the end of the first day, and the last group, a couple of them ran to the clubhouse. So I didn't get the 3rd hole. A couple others. One player said, "Don't videotape me again," because he topped it into the water, and he said, "Get away from me. I don't want to be videotaped." So you can deal with that. We lost a couples. Comparisons made. I'm going to show you this today. Golfer performance across the holes. Right, that's the sort of fundamental question: is do they change between the 3 holes? And then I also, because I had a good group, I took that and I broke them into 4 different groups based on their handicap index, and I looked to see if there were differences there. And then I'm going to give you this supplemental analysis where I looked at range performance versus on course. So we'll start with golfer performance across the holes. All right, this is where you probably want to start: club head speed in miles per hour. And on each of these, you'll see in red or green, it'll say in red whether or not the differences are statistically significant. Here, club head speed not significantly different across the 3 holes. Not surprising, since they're all 170-yard shots and they're using similar clubs. You can see the ranges of club head speed that we have for that distance. Again, if you're good with distances and versus club head speed, you might say, boy, that looks like a longer, shorter shot, but we've got altitudes affect 6,200 feet. Tempo, all right, backswing versus downswing. You can see the averages are running in the low 3s to 3.5. That means the backswing is 3.5 times longer than the downswing. And you see there's really no difference across the 3 holes. In fact, there's really not even a trend. I thought maybe people would get a little quicker, shorter when the hole gets really difficult and accuracy is really important. It didn't show up at all there. So tempos didn't seem to change in this group across the 3. You can see from the thin black bars that rise from each of those columns, that's the measure, the standard deviation, sort of the measure of variability. You can see there's reasonable amount of variability. That's because I had a +3 golfer with a tempo well over 4. And then I had another one who was down at about 2.5. So tempo is so highly variable that it's not surprising that we wouldn't get significant differences. All right, shaft angle at lead arm parallel. Really interesting. This is the most stable variable I saw. You look at those columns there. It looks like I've grabbed the same data set. I didn't grab the same data. Those are absolutely almost identical across the 3 holes. All right, so there's no shortening up, there's no getting tense, or there's no casting or changes. It seems to be one of those variables that is invariant, and in human subject research, sometimes it's what doesn't change can be as interesting as what does change. And here you see they had very fine, exquisite control and consistent position of the club at lead arm parallel. Interesting. You can see the number there, about 160 degrees. That's 20 degrees to the loaded side. The avatar up in the right, that's probably more like 40. That was one of my best golfers in the group. I wanted to demonstrate what that variable is. But on average, it was about 20 degrees toward the loaded side. Okay, so we did have some significant differences, and they were, to be honest, surprising. And here's one of them: pelvic rotation at the maximum pelvic rotation at transition. So you're seeing numbers in the 40 to 43 degree range. And the second hole, the hole 11, the easier of the shots over water, we had more pelvic rotation than the other 2 holes. And I can't give you the scientific reason. One thing we should always remember as we go through this is both of the holes over water, the miss you cannot make is right. So you're protecting right, trying to miss left if you are. So some of these variables may be influenced by the need to protect from going right. This one, pelvic rotation, hole 11, a little bit more rotation. They've gotten warmed up. They're in the mix. It's mid-morning now. Perhaps hole 17, we had less rotation in trying to scale the swing down a bit. But I can't really tell you what the differences are, but they were significant, and very much so. Similar result with sway gap at impact. You can see that, again, the avatar showing what that variable represents, the difference between the chest and the pelvis at impact. And again, that second par 3, the hole 11, was significantly greater sway gap. Sway gap is, we talk, Terry Rolls in our group, we talk about sway gap as it rises. It can be an inhibitor of release and more of a, we'd say an opener. If you're looking at things that close and open the club face, this would be an opener. Surprising that you'd see that on a hole where trouble is on the right. Nevertheless, this is what the data showed us. Again, they're warmed up into this time in the round. It's not as pressure. It's not a pressure shot like 17, but this is what we got. Chest turn at impact. This one here, and I've got this indicated above. This one, we had a significant difference where hole 17, that hardest hole, we had larger, more open position of the chest at impact. It was only statistically different than hole 11. It was closer to hole 6, but it was definitely the highest we got. And if you're asking for me to speculate why that might be, remember that there's a left shot bias. I'm going to put up the hole here. This is hole 17 from the tee box. Again, the bailout or the miss is to the left. And so if we have some individuals that are open, really trying to get open and get around and turn the corner and get that ball left and not lose it to the right, it could be one of the explanations for that. But we definitely did see more chest turn at impact on that hole. All right, now I'm going to shift. I'm going to shift to looking at golfers across the 3 holes. I'm sorry. First, I'm going to give you a summary, and then we'll go to the across the groups. So observations and thoughts. Lots of variability in the data, like we've learned. All of us in this business know golf is a messy sport when we measure things. We expected consistency across holes on some of these variables: club head speed, shaft angle, lead arm parallel. Those were indeed consistent. Tempo was not changed. I was surprised we didn't get any changes in tempo. No trend toward getting faster. And then we did have those surprise differences on max pelvic rotation and sway gap at impact. All right, so now I'm going to shift and take a different look at the data and say, of our golfers, let's divide them into 4 groups: plus 3.4 to 5.3 index, real good golfers, 5.5 to 9.7, 10.2 to 13.5, and then 13.9 to 27. You can see the numbers in each group. So very similar group sizes. And I'm just going to jump to a conclusion here. No significant differences across these groups based on index on all of these variables. And some of them make sense. I mean, tempo, again, the variability is so high, we wouldn't expect differences across these groups. Pelvic sway, sometimes a swing fault might get too much sway, and maybe the higher handicap group would get that, but we didn't see that in this par 3 study. Another one, sway gap at impact, thought to be a dynamic club head speed generator. Maybe expected more there from our better golfers, but it didn't arise to the level of being significant. Some of these other shaft angle at lead arm parallel, that's a loading factor, right? The more load, the better player, more load. But again, it washed out as a non-significant effect, and you can see the others. What was different was of interest, but this list, why would we not see these? Well, we have to, again, lots of variability. This is not a large sample size. 39 subjects is not large, especially given the variability. We know that handicap index isn't the best indicator of swing mechanics and how good your swing is, especially in this level of player. It could be you can have a 65-year-old that putts and chips and carries an 8 handicap, but doesn't have that great a swing and only hits it 220 yards, right? So we know that. And then within this mix, and this is something that happens when you study golfers in an event like this, is they're using different clubs. Some of the better players are hitting 9 irons, and then some of them are hitting hybrids. Experience, lots of experience on this course with some. They're not affected by the holes, the difficulty of the holes. There's age differences in the groups that can certainly change, for example, pelvic rotation and chest rotation, range of motion. Event motivation, this one here, early on, I wanted this study to be a study of golfers in competitive situations. But a Saturday morning tournament at a club in anywhere in the world, even if it's a tournament, if you're not in the mix and you're not in the money and you're not in the hunt and you get to the hole 17, you may not be as motivated as you are if this is the club championship, 2-day event, money on the line, and so forth. And so we have to think about those things. Were they really motivated all the way through all 3 holes here? And then shot strategies. We did not ask the golfers where were they aiming, right? Were they aiming left of the green in front? Were they trying to be short? Were they trying to clear the bunker and take more club? If we did that, then we're starting to get in their heads and they're starting to think about what we're looking at. So we didn't want to do that, but that could affect some of this data. So what did emerge as significantly different? Club head speed. Right? Club head speed was higher for our low handicap golfers. And that's despite all of these being 170-yard holes. So this is the difference between swinging a 9-iron at 100 miles an hour and a hybrid at 83 miles an hour. Club selections had an influence there, but we did get a significant difference here. Pelvic rotation maximum, you can see there's a difference here that the 10.2 to 13.5 index group had more pelvic rotation. A couple of effects are probably going on here. This is not a driver study. This is not a club head speed maximization task. This is a controlled shot to a par 3. And I would expect the plus 3.4 to 5.3 group, that low handicap group, to be using submaximal efforts, prioritizing accuracy, club contact, and distance control. As you move to the right, you likely get golfers that are trying to generate club head speed more so than dialing the swing back and going at 70% or 80%. That group from 10.2 to 13.5 has more younger golfers in it than that higher group. So that can cause maybe behind some of the increased pelvic rotation. All right, so those are really the only 2 major differences that came out between the groups. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about this supplemental analysis, which became one of the exciting things that we learned in doing this study. I saw this variability in the data as we went through it and did the analysis. And we knew we were focusing on real playing conditions. And I thought, I wonder what these same subjects do if I put them on a driving range and I give them 10 shots with that same club. And in fact, the first 10 shots before they've even gone out and played. And how would that performance compare to what they do on the course? So I had my list of golfers. I went and I found 2 of them. And it was about 3 weeks after this competition. And I found them on another morning. And I said, I need you to do me a favor. I want you to warm up. I don't want you to hit the club that we used on the par 3s. And I had that in a list. Turns out both of them were using hybrid 5s. And I said, don't use your hybrid 5. I'm going to come up there when you're ready, and I'm going to capture the first 10 shots you hit on the range, and then you can go play. And that's what we did. All right, first 10 shots on the driving range, and it was the same club they used in our par 3 study. What am I interested in there? This is one of the fundamental issues golfers have when they say, I can't take my range game to the course. Well, I'm going to measure your range game, and then I'm going to see what you did on the course and see what the differences are. All right, so this is my first subject. He's a 10.7 index. He's a pretty good golfer. And this is his impact position, club head speed on the range, his first 10 shots with his hybrid 5. And you can see I put the average in there. It's 87.3 miles per hour. The last swing was the best, right? About 98 miles an hour.
Jeff, I think Jihei has a question.
Yes, Jihei.
Did they have a target on the range, or were they just told to hit?
They had a target on the range because I needed that for Sportsbox setup to make sure that I was perpendicular to their target line. They did have a target. Now, great question and important. Nate and I were talking about this earlier today. It wasn't a distance target. It was a flag. It was out there. They were hitting to a green, but I don't think if I asked them if they knew what the distance was to that target. They were trying to hit good shots at that flag, and I was using that as my alignment. So 87.3 miles an hour in his 10 swings. That was the average. Here's what he did on his 3 swings on the course. 82.5 miles an hour, and decreasing with hole difficulty, because the hole difficulty went up from 6 to 11 to 17. So he had a 4.8 mile per hour drop in club head speed in his range performance versus the course. Interesting there. Another variable that I looked at, pelvic rotation at impact. His average on the range, 23.1 degrees. Out on the course, his data showed he was rotating 30 degrees. So here we actually have an increase in pelvic rotation at impact on the course. No significant change in sway numbers and shaft angle, lead arm parallel. Maximum speeds weren't different across that. In terms of lead arm, he did have some lower rotational speeds of his torso and his pelvis. But we're seeing differences, right? Again, this may favor the course. The course favors a miss on the left side of these 2 greens, and he may be making sure he got through the shot, finished the swing to avoid a right miss. Something that he didn't have to think about on the range. All right, this is the one that is striking. This is my other subject, 14 index. He's a very handsy golfer, 93.7 miles per hour with his hybrid 5 on 10 shots in a row on the driving range. His data from our study, 77.8 miles per hour. Right, significant decrease, relatively consistent on the course, but a significant decrease. That's 16 mile an hour drop in club head speed range versus the course. Right. Pelvic rotation at impact, 24.4 degrees open at impact, his pelvis, right? 10 shots in a row. And what did he do on the course? 17.7 on one hole, he barely even turned. And I want to point out, you see the diagram over on the right of the capture. That capture, you look at that and you think it's his address position. That's his impact position. He does not open much at all at impact. Again, he's very handsy, but he's worse at doing that. He doesn't open much at all when he's playing on the course. In those 10 shots on the range, he was much more open at impact.
You have another question?
Yes.
Did you know whether he was trying to hit a full shot on the course?
Well, no. So I didn't allow myself to ask what his strategy was on those holes.
Okay.
You know, this is a look without knowing what their strategy is on the range. Presumably, he's trying to hit good shots, full, solid contact, minimal curvature. He's a pretty straight ball hitter, so he's trying to get his rhythm. And in fact, I point out something here. Not only is there a 6.7 degree drop in pelvic rotation, but the range data, you look at the range data, this is, those of you who are familiar with block versus random practice. In block practice, you expect high variability early, and then as you accumulate trials or swings, in this case, consistency starts to build, right? You start to do the same thing over and over again. If you're a golfer and you think it through, you're dialing it in. You're getting the feel of the right impact conditions. I'm going to highlight those last 3. They're very similar in their range, about right around 25 degrees. Right, he's ready to go to the course, but then he gets on the course, and you see what happens on the course. Who knows what's going to happen? But he seems to stop turning when he's on the course.
So Tyler had a question. Any idea the average distance of their 5 hybrid? I presume it's 170 or thereabouts.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So what you'd say if you asked him that, you'd say, so what do you hit when you have a 170-yard shot to a green? They'd say, I hit my 5 hybrid. If I asked them, what flag are you hitting out to here on the range and what's its distance? They probably couldn't tell you. They're not out there with a rangefinder picking out a 170-yard target and hitting to that. It's one of the lessons you can learn from this is what it looks like, what they're doing on the range in terms of the intention may be very different than what they do on the course. And so they're not really practicing to get ready for what has to happen on the course. Maximum upper arm speed on the range, 849. That's a high number. That's as high as my +3 handicap golf, a real high arm speed for a 14 index. On the course, very consistent, but significantly slower arm speed. Again, it might be the intention, it might be submaximal effort. But when this is bringing into question, what are you doing on the range and how is that like or dissimilar to what you do on the course? 16% reduction in maximum arm speed. And again, look at those last 4 here. They're all almost identical in arm speed on those last 4. Higher variability early as he got accustomed to the length of that club and the timing. And those last 4 shots were very consistent, but not the same as they were when they got to the course. Just fun data, brings up a lot of questions. Also for that same subject, decrease in sway and sway gap when he was on the course. He wasn't as dynamic in getting the chest behind the pelvis at impact. He had no change in the shaft angle. He did the same thing on the range as he did on the course. Again, this is one of those variables that came out in the big comparison across the holes with everybody, as well as here's an individual, no difference in lead arm parallel position for the shaft. Decrease in pelvic rotation speed, decrease in chest rotation speed. That's why he didn't have as much club head speed, is everything turned slower when he went on the course. All right. So
we have 2 more questions on this particular golfer.
okay.
Jeff Smith says, any idea of where they hit the ball in the club face?
Not measuring that. I'm with my iPhone. We didn't have TrackMan out there or Foresight. We weren't doing anything with the dynamics.
And then Kieran,
what they were saying was, they were like, I was writing down the results of every shot on the range. And they'd say, that was a push. That one, he blocked that one. And that one was, perfect. That was great. And they'd give me that feedback and I'd write it down. Some qualitative measure of impact quality, but we weren't measuring it, no.
And then Kieran asked, do you have a picture of the 14 handicapper at impact?
Yes, I do. That was it back here. That's it on the right. That's where I put it up. I said, is that impact or is that address? That's his impact position.
Amazing.
Again, very armsy golfer. He's not generating much speed with his hips and his torso, but he's up at over 800 degrees per second with his arms. All right. And in fact, over on the left is his impact position during the study on that last par 3. So we do have that look there. So if I kind of summarize the par 3 data, iron swing mechanics do change across holes of identical length on just a few variables, even in this subject group. Effects of index across 3 swings are subtle, very few variables change. Those that did change club head speed, you could predict, and a little bit on pelvic rotation. This supplemental analysis, once it's done, now that we've done it, I want to go and get about 10 more subjects and do the same one. Very striking differences between what they were doing on the range. I call it range work. Brings up the question, what were you trying to accomplish before playing? And we exposed that. And this is probably very subject specific, right? A golfer who can't take their game from the range to the course effectively every time may have specific variables, specific swing features that break down or change the most when they go into playing conditions. All right, so the process here, I want to loop all the way back to the beginning when I talked about how nice it is to be able to get into playing conditions and be able to measure real golf performance and not being in a laboratory. It gives us a chance to look at all these new questions like we are asking, hole-to-hole effects. We looked at just par threes and iron shots. You could do the effect of drivers or long irons. Stress and anxiety effects. This is what's nice about being able to get out into the actual game rather than the laboratory. Fatigue effects. Boy, wouldn't it be great to understand when fatigue sets in? What are the mechanical breakdowns that occur? Pre-shot routine effects. Phil and I talked about this one. You could test that, right? Put them through different pre-shot routines and measure the swing mechanics variables. Targeting strategy, shaping shots and trouble shots, right? And then what we did here, we dabbled into and explored a bit what might be difference between range and playing performance. Here's a Country Club of Colorado. They helped us out a lot on this, obviously gave me access to all the players and let me set the pin positions for a couple of weekends. And I'll open it up to questions and comments.
This is very cool. I wish I could hire somebody to just follow me around for a few months. So Tyler had a question on the par 3 study. Did you look at any interactions between handicap groups and par 3 difficulty?
No, I want to do that also. Yes, I did the index group differences and I did the whole differences. And then the next analysis we want to do is the interaction. I did have that same question. I thought, is it possible that the low handicap golfers are not affected by hole difficulty as much as the high handicap golfers? And I would expect that it would be that way, but I haven't teased that data out yet. I'd like to get some more data more subjects into the study before doing that, but I've got that same question.
Was it stroke play or match play?
It was stroke play.
Okay. All right, Carl had a question. Going back to the swings you captured during the event, did you compare each player's numbers individually for each hole to see if there was a player-specific change for each hole? So instead of just looking at range versus, oh, wait, hold on. Did you compare each player's numbers individually for each hole to see if there was player-specific change for each hole?
Yeah, rather
Right.
than just looking at the averages.
Yes, I have that data. I presented the averages here today. I was looking at the direction of changes within each subject. That's part of the statistical analysis. But I can't tell you on average what they did as individuals until we got to that last portion of the study where I looked at each swing independently. But yes, that's a look that we want to do where you go in and look at each individual. I saw the data. I will tell you, I didn't see. I'm looking for trends within the data. I'm looking for which variables seem to be lighting up as significant differences, and inputting a lot of this data early on, inputting it from Sportsbox by hand, and I'm watching these, and I was not seeing systematic changes. Maybe one subject goes from 4.5 inches to 5 inches to 5.5 inches on max sway. And if I saw everybody doing that, everybody increasing their max sway across holes, I'd say that would light me up, and I'd say, all right, we need to do that individual look. But I didn't see that as I was compiling the data.
Very cool. Anyone else have a question? Drop in the chat. I find this so fascinating. I feel really motivated to try to figure out for myself, my own game. Like, I'm going to go measure my swings on the range versus on the golf course. I think I know what the differences are, but it'd be good to measure and confirm. And I presume that it's slightly different for individuals. But another takeaway for me was just practicing correctly. Practicing for the golf course, putting yourself under pressure on the range, I think is, and having variable practice is really important for golfers to remember.
Yeah, I found that, Jeff, I found that really interesting where you had to drop in speed down to like 70 something miles an hour. I think it comes back to intent. Maybe the guy had a different intention when they were on the range, so, or when they were on the tee box. So I think what that points out is when you're practicing, you better practice what you're really going to do on the course. Maybe in your mind say, oh, I'm at number 7 now, or I'm at number 11 now, and maybe kind of simulate those holes.
Right.
Yeah.
There's some research that was done where they had one group use block practice in a preparation for play, where they would do what a lot of golfers do. They hit 8 pitching wedges, and then they hit 8 9-irons, and then they work their way through the bag up to the driver, and then they go to the putting green, and then they go to the course. The other group, they randomized the club selection, so they might hit an 8-iron, then a driver, then another driver, and then a 3-iron, and it was literally randomly arranged. They were told what club they had to hit next, and then they tracked performance into the round, and they saw that there was an improvement in performance all the way out to the 3rd hole in the group that had random pre-round practice. It's what very few people do. They don't walk out there with 6 clubs and they drop a club and they start with a different club on every shot. But the idea is every shot requires the planning, the pre-shot routine, target selection, posture setup. Every shot you have to go through that entire process. Where if you're just scraping balls in for your 7-iron and you're hitting 10 in a row, you don't have to go through that. And what emerges, or the story is that it's really important to get the entire pre-shot routine and the advanced portion of the golf swing done and practiced as well. So makes sense.
Well, we're out of time for today, unfortunately, but Dr. Broker, Dr. Cheetham, thank you so much for today. This was really, really fascinating to learn about. Last thing I'll just leave everybody with, if you are interested in learning more about Sportsbox, please email Edwin F@sportsbox.ai, and we'll follow up. Thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of the evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.